this is who I am, you know, out on land. This is my Inuit way of living, with the smoked fish and you know, the birds and the hunting and the trapping and stuff. This is who I am, you know.
They don't understand. They got to stop and think. I mean, God put them fish in the water for the people.
Fried salmon, boiled salmon, and you make fish steak. Delicious.
Everything, the eyeballs, the nostrils, the muscles in the cheek, the little gristle in the top of their nose, skin. I make sure I eat the skin of all fish.
You want omega? Here's omega.
Midsummer on the northern Labrador coast. Atlantic salmon are returning from their winter at sea to the coastal areas of Nunatsiavut. By late summer they will head to the rivers and make their way upstream, where they will spawn. Meanwhile, their close relative, Arctic char, have been feeding inshore for many weeks. They will soon begin to move toward the heads of the bays in preparation for their journey upstream to inland waters. Unlike salmon, Arctic char will overwinter in the frozen ponds of the interior, returning to the bays the following spring. For thousands of years, Atlantic salmon and Arctic char have persisted along this coast. As anadromous fish, they migrate from freshwater to the sea, and then return to freshwater in order to spawn. Along the way, they adapt to vastly different ecosystems, and somehow manage to navigate to their home river. During this same time, the Aboriginal people have acquired a wealth of knowledge about the natural rhythms associated with the availability of their fishery resources. They have developed skills for how best to harvest and preserve salmon and char, modifying their gear and techniques as they adapted to changes. Over centuries, they have created rich social, cultural, and spiritual traditions, which they continue to pass to the next generation. For the people of Nunatsiavut today, Atlantic salmon and Arctic char remain at the center of their culture and heritage, helping to define who they are and how they relate to their natural world. Atlantic salmon live in the North Atlantic Ocean, with their North American range extending from Ungava Bay south to the mouth of the Connecticut River. Atlantic salmon from Labrador undertake extensive migrations to their overwintering areas in the Labrador Sea, with some traveling as far as West Greenland. Not all salmon return each year to Labrador rivers. Those that travel to West Greenland spend multiple winters at sea. Some of these salmon may return to Labrador from a northern route, arriving on the north coast during the fall. For the Labrador Inuit, the annual arrival of Atlantic salmon is one of the most carefully observed and eagerly awaited natural events.
Biggest fish ever in John Point.
When the salmon would come, it's going to depend on the type of a season it is, of course. A year when there isn't any ice on the coast, ice coming from the north, running up the Labrador coast, the salmon will come in probably in late June. If it's a summer with a lot of ice running along the coast, then we might not get any salmon until sometime in July. Salmon, from what I understand, don't run under the ice.
The runs of salmon usually start around the 7th of July the 1st. That's when the first good sign of salmon started to come around. The first lot of salmon usually are the larger ones. And we've seen a pattern where large salmon come first, and usually in August and late July you see increase in smaller salmon. But over the last couple of years we've seen that some people will get smaller salmon with the large salmon. So there seems to be a combination of fish arriving at the same time. The pattern has changed a little. Now we get salmon. The young ones coming a little earlier with the older ones.
Yeah, there's a big change in the salmon too, because there's a lot of peels, we call them peels, they're small salmon. But scattered ones we get maybe close to 18, 19 pounds. It's very scarce. But don't get very many whole big salmon. Mostly all like 5, 6 pounds, something like that. But first when they start coming, it gets about like 14, 15 pounds. But it's not very often.
Cartwright usually starts and say they let the Riglet people know, and then up in Northwest the people that do, the people in Riglet, or they say that the salmon, somebody got so many salmon, then we say, okay, within a week they're going to hit up in our area, up in Lake Melville. And it's always happened. That's the way they come, they migrate, see. And then some more times we just see a lot of stouts around, a certain colour stout, and the people will say, well, that's a salmon stout. So the salmon is getting close.
Arctic char have a circumpolar range and are the most northerly of all anadromous and freshwater fishes. They spend less time at sea than salmon and do not make extensive journeys. Char begin their seaward migration during the spring runoff and ice breakup in the rivers. Along the coast north of Nain, they may journey outside the bays in search of prey.
Char lives in ponds and in rivers wintertime, and then they come out when spring break up, and then they spend the summer feeding, probably about 3 weeks or a month. They come all out around the head of the bays, all out around the coastline.
In July and August, just when they start going in to the brooks and there, hang around in the brooks. And sometimes in middle of August or somewhere around 20th, and they go in the brook, and this time we finish fishing, then when they go in the brook.
When we were fishing, the capelin was here, and the char would stay in the bay all year, all summer. But now there's nothing to eat, and as soon as the ice goes out, now the char disappears over the summer. They go on out wherever they're trying to get food, and in August they come back in. So most of the summer they're not around.
The Labrador Inuit have accessed the local salmon and char populations by moving seasonally to coastal areas where the fish could be intercepted during the peak runs. This was especially important for families that took part in the commercial salmon and char fishery. From Upper Lake Melville, they traveled to fishing stations near Rigolet. From Makovic and Postville, Hopedale and Nain, they traveled to outside islands. Sometimes the journey lasted several days.
The day school was out, actually everybody's motorboats was full of the dogs and the kids and the dishes and the mattresses, and we'd come over here to live for the summer. And we ate porcupine, we ate some ducks, and we'd eat not very many salmon because our salmon were to sell. So we'd have, like you'd sell the big salmon whole, and the small salmon, you'd take the heads off of them, and we used to eat the heads, and we'd eat the liver, and we'd eat the buttocks, the stomachs of the salmon. We'd clean them out and eat them.
We used to leave Mulligan 1st of June and row out to Riglet, which is about 60 miles over, in a small rowboat there. All small children and dogs running along shore. And
Sometimes it used to take 6 and 8 days. You had a real good time, no wind, you could do it in three days. With any wind blow at all, anything about 10 or 15 kilometer wind, we had to run ashore, because we loaded so much. Because everything we wanted was in our boat. So our family was 5, but some people had 6 and 8 and 10 children, eh? Sometimes there'd be 5 boats of us rowing down together, but we'd leave it 3 or 4 days ahead of one another. Better for getting food going along, eh? Like for getting ducks and that. You had to get everyone food going along. There was nothing. We had nothing to eat, only bread and butter. We didn't.
Families moved north between 80 and 100 miles. And, you know, there were some 23, 24 families that moved down there. And we had a little 50-foot collector boat. And usually around the first part of July, we would take the first families down. Some would go by themselves. And they all had their little fishing spots around Oakok Bay, Mugford's area. This is all between 80 and 100 miles north of Nain. And they would start fishing char first, and then they would move off to the islands and fish salmon. We did that all summer. We just go back and forth, bring a fish back to the fish plant, and food and supplies and passengers back down to the little fishing spots.
For the residents of Nain, the fishing season when they lived at camps was a particularly important time for the whole family.
And the salmon was really good around Cutthroat area, north of the Killpike there. Yeah, some people get 90, 100 salmon a haul in the morning. Just about 70, 80 miles from here, I guess, north of here. There were a lot of people fishing there, houses there, and most of them lived in Labrador tents, the way most of the family. They stayed there till school started, and some of them would come back when the fishing got too bad.
We always went back to Oakok Bay because Father was a fisherman, and that lifestyle was very good for the family. Father took everyone up to Oakok Bay in motorboat, and that helped us to live as a family throughout the summer. When people fished for salmon and char, north of Nain or out on the lakes or in the bays around Nain or anywhere else, family was together, and the young people, you know, stayed out of trouble, and they learned to do things. They felt useful. They felt that they were worth something, and their self-esteem was much better. They were healthier mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I believe that we need to get something like that back. Learn the cultural Inuit way that was used to live off the land, to know who you are and to know where you come from. And I believe even that can change a person, especially if our children and our young children can go back to be shown where their grandparents and their parents used to fish, used to live after fish, the caribou, the seal, the birds.
The Labrador Inuit built a knowledge base about where and when the fish move and how to adapt their techniques to patterns of natural occurrences involving ice, tide, and wind. They combined this local knowledge with adjustments to the gear and mesh sizes over time. Through these adaptive measures, the stocks are managed for conservation and so that beneficiaries can access the resource.
You set a net in a particular place for salmon where you know that there's quite a bit of bait, what we call lanch and capelin, gathers. There's usually a good place for salmon. And also, if you put your net in a cove, you have less problem with keeping it clean. Because if you have it in a tidy place, the tide is on the net and let more strain on your net, not fishing as well. And if there's any kelp running, usually your net is usually floated on the water and fills up with kelp. So if you put your net into a smaller cove where there's less tide and not as much strain on it, then the net hangs properly and fishes better. When you put a net on an angle in the cove, it fishes better because when the tide falls, the net can hold its same position, facing toward from the shallow water to the deeper water areas, and it seems to fish a lot better, and that plays a role.
And the lie of the land too, certainly, okay? Say if we were here and we're expecting salmon come from this way, we'd change our angle probably to 60, 70 degrees, eh? Depends on the tide and that too. If you watch the iceberg, when it would come to the land, right where you put your net, that's where the iceberg would go. That's a good bird, because I think the flow of water would bring the fish right there every time, practically. You know, if you see an iceberg and watch it coming and see where it goes, and we would always say too, look at iceberg, look at icebergs, and they're going to go right to our net, and that's good birds, I think, personally.
Individuals established berths in areas that were known to be good places to fish. The right to fish at a particular berth has been passed down through generations and is maintained through an informal network of respect. People identify each berth by name.
Okay, this here is called a grassy cove. That place is almost 90 years old now, that building. My Uncle Henry Paddle, his father used to fish here before him, and now I fish just up above there.
They sat in it there on Sunday, called it Sunday Rock. There was another one, Porpoise Point. We had a porpoise in that net at one time. Up above that, there was a place called Fish Point, full of codfish in that net. So we would just put the names on as, there's a little bend. We refer to that as in the bend. Every bird had its own name, right?
The Labrador Inuit have always depended on salmon and char for food. Now, through the Nunatsiavut government, a communal fishery for food, social, and ceremonial purposes has been established and is managed with community-specific conditions regarding dates, net length, and mesh size, which can vary from year to year. Beneficiaries are entitled to one communal salmon license for their household. In 2010, the household limit was 7 salmon. There was no limit on char.
Big female gets the spawn in it.
Charlotte and David Wolfrey have been drying salmon at their cabin near Rigolet. They are getting ready to smoke them in the traditional way.
We get this stump up here, look.
They gather moist, rotten wood and sods from the plant known locally as blackberry.
That's good, the ground is good, Dave, because that'll smother the... That's good. Now we should go over and try to start the fire. Yes, he gonna go. I told you, one match, see, Labrador girl.
The fire produces much smoke without being too hot, while the blackberry sweetens the flavor.
Smokehouse all good, fire perfect. Smoked salmon after, I guess, Rigolet salmon, I guess.
So some people would make Pepsi or like split up in slices and dry it, and other people would smoke it, and some people would salt it. So you could have stewed fish or fried salmon or boiled salmon, and or you could have dried fish, you know. So there was a combination of ways of preparing the food. Basically, smoked, dried, and salted. That was the way that we lived in, like there were no freezers or anything like that. So salt was a main way of preparing the food, like preserving the food and drying it or smoking it. So you had to eat it fresh or prepare it.
I thought you weren't hungry.
I'm not. I'm only doing this manners thing.
It's fun.
316 drop right.
There you go. Everybody, dig it. Right here on this.
Usually, nearly every part of the salmon is consumed. Sharing a meal is an important tradition.
Anybody want any mustard?
In the coastal communities to the north, especially Hopedale and Nain, Arctic char is consumed in greater numbers than Atlantic salmon. To fish for char, people still practice the traditional net fishery, while increasingly they fish for char with a rod.
Char is more important here than any other species of fish, I think. It's the most sought after fish here, it's most widely used. I'd say every home in town uses char, like every home in perhaps Riglet uses salmon for their primary food species.
Studies by Nunatsiavut and university researchers have established that more char is harvested in the region of Nain than in any other community. Nain residents access char year-round. During the winter, they fish through the ice on freshwater ponds.
Or it's easier to get around now. You got the skidoo. Because before they couldn't. Before the skidoo, they had the dog teams, and they couldn't really get around to the bays. But so they got the char in the summer, salted and that. And with the skidoos, you can, where they took a day to go in with the dog team, they take about an hour now, so they can go fish whenever they want with the skidoos.
For the older generation of today, Atlantic salmon and Arctic char remain at the center of their culture and heritage. They hope that the younger generation will appreciate how the fundamental values of the Inuit culture also apply to the use of salmon and char. Those values center on respect, sharing, and not allowing any waste.
Using all of the animal, using the whole thing, I think that connects people with the animal itself.
How you got to make solo necessary. I think you not one. I think you not me. How you got to make
Nobody would keep their first salmon for themselves. They'd cut it up and share it out amongst their family or the people that they know are going to the elders or the people they know that are going to appreciate it.
The people of Nunatsiavut believe in keeping healthy the Labrador populations of Atlantic salmon and Arctic char. The responsibility is theirs, to manage wisely so that the people may benefit and the migrations of these magnificent fish may continue.
58.
Yeah.
All set for the weather.
If you look at oceans and fish, I mean, they've been around oceans for about 1 million years, and the fish too, and they've done pretty well. And to say we got to manage them, to me, even as a fishery officer, it's a bit ridiculous. I think it's people who have to manage themselves. That's what I really believe. That's what I really believe. Because they've done pretty good on their own until we came along.
But I think for the long term, for that renewable resource, char, which is important to everyone, it's got to be taken care of by us. We're into our own, taking care of our own things now, self-government and all that. So it's really important for us to take care of it.
Our wildlife and the beautiful land we live in, and we are supposed to take care of it. We have a responsibility.
Please be a conservation-minded person. Always respect what the elders have said and is saying, and as long as I'm living, I will pass that message on to them. And I'm just hoping some of those young people can hear me, and I can make a difference in one life for the sake of our resource.
Learn as much as you can from the older people in the community, because the knowledge there is unsurpassed, and there's a wealth of knowledge, and more so than any book.